Rocky Freeman and Kenny Wing. Hey, fellas, thanks for coming in on a beautiful Sunday morning.
Good morning.
Thank you.
And you are here because we have invited you as representatives of the Arnold Trail Historical Society. I've been wanting to get somebody on since Stephen Clark put that book out a few years ago, and I picked up a copy at the Pines Market, and it was like, wow, somebody actually wrote a book about the Arnold Trail March. And ever since then, I've been wanting to get somebody from the Historical Society, and then lo and behold, somebody actually works here who's on it. Both of you fellows work here at Sugarloaf.
Right.
We do.
Yeah.
And the treasurer of the society works here as well, Alan Burnell.
Right.
So there's a bunch of us.
Is he still working in transport?
He's the supervisor of the explorers.
I need to get out more, clearly, don't I, Kenny? And you're on Perfect Turn,
Yes, that's correct.
but you live in Rangeley.
Yes.
And Kenny, of course, you're a local yokel. You're Eustis born and bred.
Correct. Rocky and I are both on the board of directors for the AEHS as well.
Right.
So,
So first of all, to explain to people, not everybody's even aware of what the whole Arnold Trail Historical Society would be about. And everybody still thinks Benedict Arnold was somebody who's infamous for being a traitor, but there's a lot more to the story, isn't there?
Oh yeah, a lot more.
Let you start, Rocky.
Well, it started
books
with
worth of it.
huh?
There's books worth of it.
Books
Books
worth
and
of
books
it.
worth.
But it started back in the late '60s or so. Everybody started taking an interest in the trail, if not before. But the AEHS didn't come about until the '70s, and then they got everybody together and people who were involved and liked the idea of opening a trail that was dedicated to the men of the expedition. And Benedict Arnold was a great leader at the time, and he turned against the country because of the way he was treated most of the way through the Revolution. And it all evolved from that point on, opening parts of the Appalachian Trail, combining the Appalachian Trail with parts of the Arnold Trail, starting at the Kennebec, coming up through as far as the land version goes, but starting down all the way down to Pittston as far as the Kennebec River goes.
Right.
Yeah.
So what year did that actually all happen with Benedict Arnold coming on through on his way to Quebec?
1775, the fall of 1775. They started out of Fort Western in Augusta, where was their base of operations.
And it ended up being a pretty rough ride for them along the way. Most of them didn't end up making it to the end, the poor buggers.
Yes,
Yeah.
extremely rough.
There were some problems. Hard times.
Because they picked the wrong time of the year to go, or because it was just an insurmountable feat and they really didn't know what they were undertaking, or a little bit of
It was a
everything?
combination of a whole bunch of different things. The time that they did this in the fall, they hadn't even, then ordered the boats to do it. So that was a hurried up deal. Green lumber with bateaus. Then there was a hurricane, high water. There was a spoilage of food. There was only one map that was wrong in a lot of instances. They get into bogs. They get into places that they shouldn't have gone. And between the weather and loss of food and leaking bateaus and time of year, my gosh, it was.
So how many did they start with when they left Newburyport? Would you call that the beginning?
Newburyport was the beginning. They started with about 1,100 men.
And how many made it to Quebec City?
About 500.
Right, so over half
Yes.
perished along the way.
That's the numbers they've given us in the books. It's not a real accurate count
Right.
because
You hear
Nobody really knows.
nobody knows.
Right.
No.
But there was a bunch of men that Colonel Enos turned around with his hundreds of men, and there was a lot of sick people, a lot of lost people, some deserters.
Poor souls. Must have been a horrible journey.
And then when Arnold got to Quebec, of course, there's a whole bunch of reasons why he was told to do this, ordered to do this by George Washington. But the idea was sound militarily. And he gets there and in December and finds out that most of his men's enlistments run out January 1st.
So technically, they didn't have to hang around.
No.
So he had to attack before or by January 1st. So they didn't even tell Arnold that until he got there.
That's not very good. No, I hadn't heard that little bit of that story,
Oh,
Kenny.
yeah.
That's a new one on me. Now, how come you guys have taken such an interest in this?
I was brought up with it basically, and I was a history major in school. liked it. I've always liked the history of Maine, and so I've just stuck with it. Gone from one thing to another.
I think it's a fascinating story that not a lot of people have heard very much about. That's why I was hoping you guys would come on and share some of your interest with it. And Kenny, you've got a ton of artifacts.
I do. It was handed down to me. You know,
Right.
I live on the trail. I live where the bateaux was paddled right in front of my house. I live where the men marched. Always did.
Because you're on the shore of the North Branch.
Correct.
Right.
And my father became an Arnold expedition, you know, not the man so much as the expedition historian since he was a young man, read the books that was available to him at the time, and became completely involved in that. That was his forte. And
Jake is showing some pictures there of some of the artifacts. Would those
Yep.
be things that your dad would have
Yep.
found over the years?
Yep.
What are we looking at there, for
Well,
example?
there's hatchets, two-tined forks, pike pole in the ends of a pike pole, some lead or pewter buttons, and musket balls.
And you can date that from the expedition based
Yes.
upon the metals used or the
Well, it's
style?
it's the
or-
style.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of nails there that are bent, and we call that clinched. When you built a bateau, you pound the boards together, and the sharp end sticks through in the inside, and you bend it over to clinch it.
Oh.
So when you find nails like this, 90% chance that they come right out of the bateaus.
Oh my goodness, that's a rough way to do it, isn't
And
it?
there's a belt buckle, there's a shoe buckle there.
That is very fascinating. So how many pieces have you got? Hundreds?
Hundreds.
Oh yes,
Thousands.
You know and we have some examples here today. But
This is like a musket ball?
Correct.
Right. Just about the size of a marble.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
different calibers.
Yeah.
And my father collected hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And we want to talk about, you know, that. We're not encouraging people to grab metal detectors and hit private land, which is where all our trail is on private land, and go out there and loot, you know, because everything that we find, we do through a research procedure, and then those items become involved in our museum, you know, the Arnold Expedition Historical Society Museum in Pittston, and there's a bunch of things that happens to those artifacts from a science standpoint, you know, the location and the age and the curation and where it goes and where it's stored and all that. But yeah, as starving, desperate soldiers, as they are around the world all through time, at some point on the march they said, to heck with this keg of musket balls. It's every man for himself, and they leave that stuff behind.
Right.
So you find some stuff once in a while.
That's why there's such a treasure trove with this particular expedition, just by the nature of it.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Because that's not normal. But what's a normal expedition exactly?
Well,
there's not such a thing.
there's a treasure trove in a couple of different sense. You know, it's a treasure trove that is in our backyard.
Right.
It's right on the other side of Bigelow Mountain, you know, and there's all kinds of names that come from the expedition. But the treasure trove is also diaries and journals. There was 20, 25 men that wrote journals and diaries. You study those things, and that's a treasure trove as well. You know, so we're lucky and fortunate that those things were not only written but available.
So what's the true story about Bigelow climbing Bigelow to see if he could see Quebec City from the top of it?
That is the story.
That is the true story?
No,
Okay. I didn't think it was, but it
No.
certainly is the story, isn't it?
It is. The short version is that Colonel Timothy Bigelow from Worcester, Massachusetts, was a very much of a patriot. He ran from 1775 to the end of the war, and the story is that he climbed the mountain. He never did. We have his journals. He didn't have time. He didn't have the energy. Arnold never told him to. There was snow up on the mountain. There was a hurricane coming in, and he never was ordered to do it. Timothy Bigelow's grandson come up with this family story version, and the Daughters of the American Revolution found out about it, made the plaque, changed the name of the mountain. It never happened, but it's a good story.
Hey, I'm really glad, actually, because I always thought that guy did a lot of wasted time if he climbed all the way up, because he certainly wasn't going to see Quebec City when
No,
he got there.
and that's the other.
The Frontenac, I'm not seeing it.